Her mother died. Her stepmother made sure her life became nothing but suffering. The villagers laughed at her. Some even called her cursed. Everyone in the village believed she was just a servant, a girl who woke before sunrise, carried water, cooked, and worked until her hands were sore. And when the villagers finally discovered who she truly was, their jaws dropped in disbelief. In a quiet village of Asaba, surrounded by tall palm trees and wide farmlands, there lived a young girl who knew nothing but love. Her name was Adanma. Every morning, the village woke to the sound of roosters crowing, women sweeping their compounds, and children laughing on their way to the stream. Among those children was Adanma, always walking beside her mother. Her mother was known throughout the village as a kind and wise woman. People often came to her small mud house when they were sick or troubled. She knew many herbs from the forest and could mix best medicines that helped people feel better. But more than her knowledge, people loved her gentle heart. If someone had no food, she shared hers. If a child was crying, she comforted them. And to Adanma, she was not just a mother, she was a teacher, a protector, and her closest friend. Every evening, after the day's work was done, mother and daughter would sit outside their house while the cool breeze passed through the village. Sometimes, her mother would show her leaves and roots from the forest, explaining what each one could do. "Listen carefully," her mother would say softly. "Nature speaks to those who pay attention." Adanma loved those moments. She believed life would always be like that, peaceful, warm, and full of her mother's quiet wisdom. But life can change without warning. One season, her mother suddenly fell ill. At first, the sickness seemed small. She complained of tiredness and rested more than usual. But within days, her strength began to fade. The woman who once walked confidently through the forest could now barely sit up without help. The news spread quickly through the village of Asaba. Many people came to visit her, bringing prayers and herbs, hoping she would recover. But the illness only grew worse. Adanma stayed beside her day and night, holding her mother's hand, praying silently that she would get better. One quiet night, when the moon hung low in the sky and the village had fallen asleep, her mother called her closer. Her voice was weak, but her eyes were still full of warmth. "Adanma, my daughter," she whispered gently. Adanma quickly moved closer and knelt beside her mat. Her mother slowly reached out and placed something small into her hands, wrapping Adanma's fingers around it. Then she looked deeply into her daughter's eyes. "No matter what happens to you, never forget who you truly are." Adanma frowned slightly. She did not understand what her mother meant. "What do you mean, Mama?" she asked softly. But her mother only smiled faintly. Moments later, her breathing grew slower, and before the sun rose the next morning, the kind woman who had helped so many people in the village was gone. The news spread like wildfire around the village that a great Iroko tree has fallen. Women wailed. Men lowered their heads in silence. The village had lost one of its most respected women. For Adanma, it felt as if the world itself had become empty. Days later, after the funeral rites were completed, life slowly began moving again. But Adanma's home no longer felt the same. Her father, who had always been quiet and distant, struggled with the loss of his wife and no one to take care of his young daughter Ada. Not long after, he decided to marry another wife. The villagers believed this was the right thing to do. A young girl needed a woman in the house to guide her. Months later, Adama's father got married to a beautiful maiden called Amaka. When the new wife arrived, she appeared polite and gentle. She smiled often and spoke kindly to the neighbors. Many people said Adama was lucky her father had chosen such a calm woman. But kindness can sometimes be a mask, and the peace Adama once knew was about to disappear. From that day on, the girl who once lived with love would begin a life of suffering. At first, the new woman behaved like a caring wife. She spoke gently in front of Adama's father and greeted the neighbors with warm smiles. When visitors came to the compound, she acted patient and respectful, as though she truly cared for the young girl who had just lost her mother. Because of this, many villagers believed Adama was fortunate. She is lucky, some women said while returning from the stream. At least her father married a calm woman. But what people see in daylight is not always the truth that lives behind closed doors. Few months after the wedding, Amaka changed to become a wicked stepmother to Adama. One day, she woke Adama very early in the morning, before even the roosters had crowed. "Get up," she said sharply, kicking the edge of the girl's mat. Adama rubbed her sleepy eyes and sat up. "Go to the river and fetch water before the sun rises. The pots are empty." Adama nodded quietly and carried the heavy clay pot on her head. The path to the river was still dark, and the cool morning air made her shiver. Still, she said nothing. She believed this was simply part of helping in the house, but the work did not stop. The next morning, she was sent again, then again the following day. Soon it became her daily duty. Before sunrise, she fetched water. After that, she swept the compound, cleaned the cooking pots, and prepared food for everyone in the house. While other children were walking together to the market or playing under the mango trees, Adama was already bent over work. As the days passed, the stepmother began adding even more tasks. "After cooking, go to the farm," she would say. "Clear the weeds and fetch firewood while coming back from the farm, and I want you back before evening." By the time Adama returned home, her legs were tired and her hands were sore from the farm tools. But the stepmother never seemed satisfied. "You are too slow," she would complain. "Look at how lazy you are." Sometimes she served food to everyone in the house and left only a very small portion for Adama. "If you walked faster, maybe you would eat more," she would say coldly. Adama simply lowered her head and ate quietly. She never argued, she never cried in front of anyone. To the villagers passing by the compound, it looked like Adama was only helping with house chores like any other child. They saw her sweeping, they saw her carrying water, they saw her working on the farm, and so they assumed that everything in the house was normal. But inside those walls, Adama's life had become something very different. The girl who once sat beside her mother learning about herbs and plants was now treated like a servant in her own home. Day after day, the work continued. Yet, through it all, Adama remembered her mother's gentle voice. Sometimes at night, when the compound was quiet and the moonlight fell across the ground, she would sit alone and think about the last words her mother spoke to her. "Never forget who you truly are." She did not fully understand those words yet, but somehow they gave her strength. And there was something else her stepmother did not know. A secret that could one day change everything. That night, Adama lay on her mat, staring at the faint moonlight that slipped through the small crack in the wall. Slowly, she sat up. Her fingers trembled slightly as she reached under her mat and pulled out the small cloth bundle her mother had given her years ago. It had been her most precious treasure, hidden from the world. No one, not even her stepmother, had ever seen it. Adamma unfolded the cloth with reverent care. Inside, she found a simple necklace made of brown beads with a small carved pendant shaped like a leaf. Beneath it lay a folded piece of paper worn at the edges from being opened and closed so many times, and tucked alongside them were a few small notes scribbled by her mother about herbs and their uses. Her hands shook as she lifted the necklace. It was not gold, not silver, but it carried a warmth that made her feel her mother's presence beside her. She held it close to her chest for a moment before gently opening the letter. "My daughter," it began, the ink faint but still readable. "If you are reading this, then I am no longer beside you. I did not tell many people where I truly came from, but you must know the truth. The knowledge I carry has been passed from mother to daughter for generations." Adamma's eyes filled with tears as she continued reading. Her mother spoke of their family lineage, a long line of respected healers in the village who understood the language of herbs and nature. She wrote of the medicines that could cure the sick, the leaves that could ease pain, and the roots that could heal the body. "You have watched me in the forest," the letter continued. "You have listened. You have learned more than you realize. But remember, there will come a time when people will doubt you, when they will treat you as less than you are. Do not speak until the right moment comes. Wait for it, my daughter, and you will know." Adamma folded the letter slowly, pressing it to her chest. Her mother's words were more than instructions. They were a promise, a shield, and a whisper of hope. She tucked the letter, the notes, and the necklace back into the cloth and hid it carefully beneath her mat once more. Her stepmother had grown more suspicious lately. Often she would glance at Adamma with a sharp, calculating look, and sometimes she would disappear for hours only to reappear near the girl's things, pretending to be cleaning or arranging the room. Adamma knew the woman feared something in her that she could not see or touch, something powerful, something she could never control. And perhaps the stepmother was right to fear, because Adamma carried within her the knowledge of generations, waiting for the right moment to awaken. She lay back on her mat, staring at the ceiling. Her heart pounded with a mixture of fear and excitement. She wondered what her mother had meant by the right moment. When would it come? What test would she face? And how would the village react when they saw her true self? Adamma hugged her knees close to her chest, feeling the weight of the secret her mother had left her. She knew one thing for certain. Her life was no longer hers alone. One day soon, the secret she carried would be needed. And when that day arrived, the quiet girl who endured every cruel word, every harsh task, would finally have her voice. Days passed after that quiet night. Adamma continued her chores in silence, carrying water from the river, pounding yam, sweeping the courtyard, and working in the farm. Her stepmother's voice grew sharper, her orders harsher, yet Adamma never complained. She remembered her mother's words and held her secret close. But peace in the village rarely lasts forever. One morning, a villager collapsed near the market. People rushed to help, but the man's eyes rolled back and his body shook. Panic spread quickly. Soon, another person fell ill, then another. Within days, the illness had reached the chief's own household. The chief's young son, a boy full of life and laughter, became dangerously weak. The village herbalists tried every root, leaf, and potion they knew. Nothing worked. The illness spread faster than anyone could stop it. Adamma watched quietly from a distance. She had seen the symptoms before, though not like the village elders had. Her mother had once shown her a leaf that could cure this kind of sickness, a root that could strengthen the weak, a mixture that could calm the body when illness struck. But she had never used these skills openly. For a long moment she wondered, should she speak? Should she tell the villagers what she knew? But then she thought, how would her stepmother react to this? And besides, the villagers had never listened to her before. They saw her as a servant, a weak girl with no importance. What if they laughed? What if they ignored? What if she tires and the boy dies? Adama closed her eyes, her hands trembling. She felt the weight of the secret her mother had entrusted to her, heavier than the pots she carried to the river, heavier than the bundles of firewood she hauled from the farm. Meanwhile, the village became restless. Every single day, women will run to the chief's house, begging him to do something. The elders held meetings discussing rituals, sacrifices, and prayers. They tried every medicine they knew. Yet each morning, more villagers were stricken, and fear settled in the hearts of everyone. One afternoon, as Adama was sweeping the compound, she overheard her stepmother talking to one of the neighbors. "This girl is useless," she spat. "Even in this house, she cannot do anything right. Perhaps she is cursed, and now she has brought this sickness to the village." Adama stiffened. Her chest tightened. She was surprised that her stepmother was blaming her for something she had no part in. Anger flared inside her, but she swallowed it, because there was nothing she can do at that point. Night fell, and Adama lay on her mat, her heart heavy, her thoughts racing. She pulled out the small cloth bundle beneath her bed. The necklace, the letter, and her mother's note seemed to glow under the moonlight. She read the notes carefully, remembering each instruction her mother had whispered to her so long ago. She knew she had the knowledge to save the village, but she needed courage. She had to wait for the moment when her voice would be heard. Adama hugged the bundle to her chest. Her stepmother may have thought she was powerless. The villagers may have thought she was nothing. But the secret her mother left her was more powerful than any fear. And very soon, it would change everything. The next morning, the village was tense. Rumors of the sickness had spread to every corner. People whispered in the marketplace, mothers held their children closer, and even the elders walked with worried faces. Inside Adama's home, the stepmother seemed more restless than usual. Her eyes darted around the courtyard as though searching for signs of rebellion. She was afraid of something she could not name, a quiet strength in the girl that she had never been able to break. That day, a meeting was called at the chief's compound. Everyone in the village was invited. The elders wanted to discuss the illness and decide what to do next. Adama's stepmother saw an opportunity. She would humiliate the girl publicly. She would make everyone see her as weak and useless. "Adama," she called sharply, her voice slicing through the morning air. "Come with me to the chief's palace." Adama followed silently, carrying the small basket of food she had prepared. Her heart pounded, but she kept her head down. When they arrived at the compound, everyone was discussing about the strange sickness in the town. It got to Amaka's turn to speak. Instead of talking about this strange illness, she started by pointing at Adama. "Look at this girl," she shouted. "She has done nothing for my house. She is lazy and weak. If she cannot even help her own family, how can she help anyone else? Perhaps she is cursed. She is the one who has brought this calamity upon us." A few villagers laughed nervously. Some shook their heads. Adama felt the sting of their eyes, but she did not respond. She lowered her head and stood quietly. Her stepmother continued. "She brings nothing but trouble wherever she goes. And now the village is in danger, and this girl, nothing, is to blame for everything." Adama's fingers tightened around the basket. She felt her chest burn with humiliation, but she remembered her mother's words. "Never forget who you truly are." And then something happened that none of them had expected. From the crowd, a scream rang out. The chief's young son collapsed. his small body shaking violently, panic spreading like wildfire. The elder stood frozen, unsure what to do. The stepmother's face went pale, her anger replaced by fear. The villagers' laughter vanished. The crowd murmured in shock and confusion. The stepmother pointed at Adanma, her voice trembling. "See, she has done this," she shouted. But for the first time, Adanma stepped forward. Her voice was steady, soft, but carried a calm authority that made the crowd fall silent. "Please," she said, "let me help him. I know what is wrong and how to cure him." The elders exchanged uncertain glances. Some whispered among themselves, could the servant girl truly know something they did not? Adanma knelt beside the boy. She opened her small bundle discreetly and pulled out the notes her mother had left her. With careful hands, she crushed the leaves, mixed them with warm water, and applied the remedy exactly as her mother had taught her. Every eye was on her, the villagers, the elders, and most of all, her stepmother, who stood frozen like a statue of fear and anger. Then slowly, the boy's breathing steadied. Color returned to his cheeks. The elders stared in disbelief. Even the chief's eyes widened as he watched the girl walk with quiet confidence. The girl who had been humiliated, called lazy and useless, had saved the chief's son. Adanma looked at the crowd, calm and unshaken. She felt no pride, only the quiet satisfaction of fulfilling her mother's promise. The stepmother's face went pale. She had shouted and humiliated Adanma, believing she was powerless. And now, in front of the entire village, the truth began to unfold. Adanma was no ordinary girl. An elderly villager stepped forward, squinting at the necklace she wore under her clothes. His hands trembled as recognition struck him. "That necklace," he muttered, barely audible at first. Then louder, "That is the same necklace her mother wore, the woman who healed our people, the one we all respected." A murmur ran through the crowd. People's jaws dropped, eyes widened, whispers grew into gasps. Her stepmother's face twisted in fear. She could see it now. Everyone understood. The girl she had treated as a servant was the daughter of a woman who had been a powerful healer, a woman whose knowledge had saved countless lives in the village. Adanma looked at the elders. Their faces were full of shock, awe, and a growing respect. The knowledge her mother had passed to her was not something ordinary. It was a gift that ran deep in her blood. The chief knelt beside his son, helping him sit upright. He turned to Adanma, his voice shaking. "Child, how did you know?" Adanma held her head high. Her voice was calm, filled with a quiet dignity she had carried for years. "My mother taught me," she said softly. "She told me to wait for the right moment. Today, the moment came." The villagers fell silent, some lowering their heads in shame. They had judged her too quickly, believing the stepmother's lies. They had laughed at her. They had ignored her suffering. And now, the truth was undeniable. Her stepmother took a step back, her hands shaking. She could not hide her guilt. She had thought she could control Adanma. She had thought she could diminish her spirit. But the girl's courage, patience, and knowledge had exposed her cruelty. An elder spoke next, his voice strong and firm. "This girl, the daughter of our greatest healer, has saved our chief's child when even we could not. We owe her respect. We owe her apology." The crowd murmured in agreement. The villagers, once blind to her value, now saw her clearly. Adanma stood slowly. She did not raise her voice. She did not boast. Instead, she reached for the chief's son's hand, helping him stand. The villagers watched in silence as she guided him to his mother. And then, quietly, She turned to face her stepmother. "You mocked me," she said softly. "You called me lazy and worthless, but I have never forgotten who I truly am. Perhaps now you understand." Her stepmother's shoulders slumped. She could not speak. The shame was written plainly across her face. For the first time, Adamma was not invisible. For the first time, the village saw her as she truly was: brave, patient, wise, and extraordinary. And in that moment, the quiet girl who had endured so much suffering became the center of respect, admiration, and awe. The village square was quiet now, but it was no longer tense. People stood in small clusters, whispering in awe, still shaken by what had just happened. Mothers held their children closer, but their eyes shone with new respect. Fathers nodded silently, humbled. Even the elders, who had once questioned Adamma's worth, now looked at her with admiration. Her stepmother was at the edge of the crowd, her face pale and trembling. She could no longer hide the truth of her cruelty. The words she had shouted, the insults she had thrown, and the endless labor she had forced upon Adamma, all were exposed for the whole village to see. The chief stepped forward. His voice carried across the square, firm but fair. "People of the village," he said, "we have all been reminded today of an important lesson. This young girl, whom we treated as a servant, has shown wisdom, courage, and patience far beyond her years. She has saved my son, and in doing so, she has reminded us that greatness often lies where we least expect it." The villagers murmured in agreement, some lowering their heads in shame. Adamma stood silently, listening. She did not speak. She did not demand respect. Her calm strength spoke louder than any words. The chief turned to the stepmother, his expression stern. "You, who sought to harm and humiliate this child, must answer for your cruelty. You have caused pain to an innocent girl who has shown nothing but patience. Your actions have no place in our village." The stepmother could not meet anyone's eyes. She muttered apologies, but her words were empty, her pride shattered. She had underestimated Adamma, and now the truth had shown her powerlessness. Adamma took a step forward. Her voice was gentle but strong. "I forgive you," she said. "You do not need to be punished further. Let this be a lesson not only for you, but for all of us. Cruelty only breeds shame, and patience and kindness hold the greatest power." A hush fell over the crowd. The stepmother's lips parted, as if to speak, but she found nothing to say. She had been defeated not by anger or revenge, but by the quiet dignity of a girl she had tried to break. The chief then turned to the villagers. "From this day forward, let us remember the wisdom we have seen. Never judge someone by their suffering. Sometimes, the person we think is nothing carries greatness that the world has yet to see." Adamma's eyes shone with tears, but they were tears of relief, of joy, and of quiet triumph. She looked at the village around her. People who had once ignored her, laughed at her, or doubted her, and saw a new understanding in their eyes. Her father stepped forward, his face heavy with guilt. He took her hand gently. "I did not see what you truly were," he whispered. "Forgive me, my daughter." Adamma nodded, squeezing his hand softly. She had waited for this moment. She had endured the cruelty, the labor, and the insults. And now, the village, her father, and even her stepmother had seen her true strength. In the following days, the village began to change. Mothers sought her advice for their sick children. Elders came to her for guidance on plants and herbs. People treated her not as a servant, but as a young healer, wise beyond her years. Adanma never forgot her mother's words, "Never forget who you truly are." And she had not forgotten. She had endured suffering, kept her secret, and waited for the right moment. And when it came, she had used it to save lives, bring justice, and earn the respect of everyone around her. Even the stepmother, humbled and ashamed, began to understand that kindness and patience carried far more power than cruelty. From that day forward, the village knew that greatness could come from the most unexpected places. And Adanma, once treated as nothing, became the heart of the village, a reminder that courage, wisdom, and compassion can rise even from the darkest suffering. Adanma's story spread across the village for many years. People remembered how the quiet girl who was treated like a servant became the one who saved lives when everyone else was helpless. Her patience, strength, and wisdom proved that true greatness does not shout for attention. It reveals itself at the right moment. The villagers learned a lesson they would never forget. They had judged Adanma by her suffering instead of her character, but through kindness and courage, she showed them that dignity cannot be taken away by hardship or cruelty. From that day on, Adanma lived not as the girl who suffered, but as the young healer who brought hope and healing to her people. And the village was never the same again.